plans before you and just wanted to walk through those before we talk through the options document that I gave you so you understand exactly what the options are. Maybe actually let's start with the options document and I'll talk through when we get to that option. I'll talk you through the plan sheets of what's in front of you at each option, if that works for everyone.
Sure.
All right, so I was always taught that as an option, do nothing is always an option. And so it's on here. It's obviously from last week, it may not be considered the best option on here, but it is always an option. And so the do nothing option would be MSA removes and replaces a portion of the curb and gutter on the 200 block at our expense to fix our staking area that we had. Pros and cons. The pros, limited impacts to the project schedule, and it'll fix some areas of the terrace. The cons, obviously it's not going to fix all the areas of the terrace, especially near the fitness center and on the west side of the street. And it continues to not provide any visual barrier to delineate the ADA walkway from the boulevard/terrace area. So that's option A. Cost to the city of Amory, nothing. Impacts on the project schedule, approximately 1 to 2 weeks. So limited impacts there. And the amount that you see there, I guess at the top of that, the breakdown of MSA's cost to fix the staking error, you'll kind of see that number filtered throughout these options because no matter what, MSA is responsible for that portion on the 200 block. So whatever is chosen, that's going to filter through. So you'll kind of see that as we go. So option B would be add colored concrete. And so this was identified as an option as the remove and replace. So MSA removes and replaces the curb and gutter that is deficient due to the staking error. Again, this doesn't fix any of the terrace areas or boulevard areas, but the other thing that it fixes over the do nothing option would be it provides that visual delineation between the terrace area and the sidewalk area. Cost for the city would be about $4,400 per block to add any colored concrete through that terrace area. I know there are comments on we don't want it to be red, and it doesn't have to be red. It can be a dark gray or some other color that you would choose to put in there to delineate as whatever the terrace area versus the sidewalk area would just be a visual barrier. MSA would be responsible for the money that it costs to replace that terrace area at the contract price. The city would be responsible for $2.10 per square foot, which is the difference between the colored concrete and the regular concrete. So if you wanted to change that to any sort of color, that would be an option. While we're on option B, I want to note that option can be used in any of the other options as well in conjunction with them. And it would just be an additional cost on top of that $4,400 would carry over to an additional cost on these other options that we're talking about here tonight. So those are both two of the minor options. Obviously impact the schedule a lot less and financially a lot less as well. Some of the more major options are options C and D on here. Option C, and this is for the 200 block only, would be to add one storm sewer inlet at station 35 plus 55, which is right about the American Family Insurance building, kind of right at the street there. And that's the plans you have in front of you. Should be the second page in your plan sheet that you have there. You'll see Birch Street on the left part of that, and then heading to the right side or to the north, those inlets are new. They're shown on there. And so we would be putting two inlets and a manhole there, and then running storm sewer from that manhole and connecting to the existing inlet at Maple Street. I apologize for not having that next page in your plans. There's one of them there. Our printer quit halfway through the job, and so I've got one to look at, but not all of them. But basically what that plan shows is it just tying into that existing inlet outside of the fitness center on Maple Street. So I guess the benefit of this is that nearly all grades on the 200 block for the terrace areas will be between 8 and 10% or less. We couldn't get it completely under 8% at the new inlets that we put in, just because of the way that the curb flows. It has to be a little steeper there, but coming out of those pretty quickly, it gets back to under 8% on those. I would suspect that it's roughly an area of about 20 to 30 feet that is in that 8 to 10% range, and then is below 8% the rest of the block. So obviously that is a pro. It fixes most of the areas on the terrace to be below the 8% that was kind of talked about at the last meeting. I guess the problem with it, the con with it, is that it does significantly impact the project schedule. In talking to A1, it is probably an additional 4 to 5 weeks to make this change. We're a couple weeks out from even getting storm sewer on site because they have to build it at a factory and transport it here, all of that. So once it gets on site, it'll go together more quickly, but it's going to be about a 4 to 5 week delay for the project timeline overall. The estimated cost to the city of Amory is the $40,094 that you see there. And so 2 sheets later on this document, which is probably on your tablets, there's a quote from A1 Excavating on there with prices. It breaks that down, and you see that their total is the $64,356, and that for an MSA's cost share is still at $27,500. So that's where you get the $40,000 with a little bit of extra engineering work and additional staking on MSA's part for that storm sewer, and the additional design there that was above the original contract. Is that, I guess, is option C clear? Any questions on that before I kind of explain the option D for the 100 block?
I noticed for the A1, the last page where you have the A1 quote.
Yep.
It says 30-inch curb and gutter, 800 feet at $19 a foot.
Yes.
Right now we're paying $11.50.
Yes, and I have asked the concrete contractor about that price, and because it's their justification for it, because it's rework and not part of the additional contract, they have a little bit of leeway with their prices. And what they told me was that typically they can lay, multiple thousand feet of curb a day, whether that's, 2,000 feet a day or whatever. But now to bring a curb machine in and to lay 800 feet, they essentially lose a day of their productivity. And so the unit price goes up for that amount of curb.
Can I ask a question? Couldn't they do it at the same time they're doing the south end?
Potentially, and
They'd have to be worked out later.
it would have to be worked out later. I've tried reaching out to the concrete contractor and have had limited success so far. Any other questions on option C? All right, so that's our proposed solution for the 200 block. The 100 block is a completely different beast because it's dissimilar to the 200 block in many ways. The 100 block, the biggest challenge of that is that from the difference between the Alibi and the Farm Table Restaurant is roughly 2 feet between their doors going across the road. And so the original design, we had a crown in the road that came up at a pretty minimal amount. It was 1.5%, which is considered pretty minimal on asphalt, and then went down at the maximum percent on the other side to gain as much elevation drop as we could in the roadway. The rest of that elevation drop was sucked up in the terrace areas, and that's why the slopes are out there like that. We've looked at this, we've played with it. There is not a ton we can do. We came up with one option that after toying with it for multiple hours, we think we can get it to work. And so it's gonna take more time on our end to continue to make sure that that will work. But in short, in brief, what the option is that we're talking about is instead of having a crown in the road, it would slope from the west side to the east side in one complete sheet of asphalt across there. There's some downfalls to that as far as motorist, as far as rideability goes, because you're transitioning from a crowned road, and then you're as you're heading south, you're gonna have that crowned road, and then it's gonna go up like this, and then it's gonna come back down at Center Street. So at Birch Street, you have a crown, then it tilts all the way across so we can gain that 2 feet from the alibi to the farm table, and then at Center Street, it comes back to a crown again. And so one of the challenges that we have is when that piece lifts up like that, the curb line that's out here also wants to lift up with it, which can create some backflow problems or some problems with slope on the curb. And so that would be what we have to look into more, is whether or not if it backflows enough to need to add storm sewer on that west side in the curb line. But for the most part, all of the water will be shedding away from that side and down to the others and to the east side of the road in front of farm table as it sheds all the way across the road. So the issue that's gonna create, partially from a plowing standpoint as well, is you have your curb like this, and when Jeff plows, he's gonna plow this side of the curb, and then he's gonna plow side of the crown, and then plow this side of the crown or whatever. But when you start to transition that, now you've got the plow following that, and if the crown kind of tapers over or whatever, it still breaks off as it's heading over. It can make for some difficult plowing situations. I think we can do some with making sure that we move the whole lane at the same time, which can help with some of that. But the reality is, as people are coming through town and driving through town, they will notice that switch on their cars, because they'll be leaning this way a little bit, and then they'll be leaning this way, and then they'll go back to this in a matter of a block. Unfortunately, we really can't do anything else. It's not as easy of a fix as the 200 block was by just adding some storm sewer. Just with the elevation difference between the doors, it's difficult. And so if the city would like to pursue this option, MSA can do some more digging into it, some more design, making sure that it works. Again, I believe if we spend the time on it, it will work. But I'm 80% convinced of that right now, to be completely honest. So that's kind of where we stand. And you can see the price breakdown there. Estimated cost to the city of Amory for that is the $27,000, and that cost breakdown is below on that sheet, right below that. The cost to MSA on that portion is $0 because our staking area was on the 200 block. This would be completely a redesign for the city. Impacts this project schedule. Again, we're at that probably 4 to 5 weeks, because we are looking at a little bit of potentially additional storm sewer down by the farm table restaurant near that inlet, because there's going to be more water coming across that road that we're going to need double inlets down in that corner now to make sure that that inlet, we have the inlet capacity to take that water quick enough that the road doesn't flood.
Talking to Drew this morning, I was asking questions. I was concerned more about the large rains that we get. Mm-hmm. When you flip the road over and point it towards the west side, the low side, that could be potentially a lot of rain. And he mentioned something about the 10-year flood. You would design it to fit the 10-year flood, whatever, which you have figures for.
Yeah, so the 10-year rain event would be, It's hard necessarily to describe. You would think it'd be a rain that happens once every 10 years, but it is a rain that has the percentage chance of happening every 10 years. And so I would have to look up exactly what the 10-year event is in the city here, but that is what we typically design storm sewer to, for carrying capacity and for the amount that can flow in the curb and gutter for the spread as it comes down the road. So we would look into that and how many inlets need to be on that west corner in order to have the capacity to take that additional rainfall. So,
Correct.
Two things. One, the transition from Crown to west-east slope and back to Crown, does that happen in the intersections or on somewhere on the other side of it?
Yeah.
And if you say you have more work to do, I understand that.
Yeah, we do. I think we would probably shoot for the intersections as much as we can on it. Just because there's already a number of grades coming into the intersections from side roads. With side roads having a crown on them already, it may be easy enough to kind of feather that in at less of an extreme, like, oh, I feel this as I'm going down. So that would be the hope, but we do have more work to do in that area to see exactly where we can be. Because unfortunately, like at the Birch Street intersection and the Center Street, the curbs have to tie into the existing curb and gutter on those streets, as well as we have to be within the limits of the ADA ramps and such at the building corners that are on those corners as well.
Okay, the other question is, you've got some rough estimates of 4 to 5 weeks here and there.
Yeah.
What's the total elapsed time if you choose to do those, because it's not serial, someone's parallel?
Yes, I would say that is mostly additive to the end of the project.
Right, but I mean, is it, it's 4 to 5 weeks here, 4 to 5 weeks here, you don't add them up.
No,
These
sorry.
These happen in parallel.
If you chose option C and D together, I am anticipating the project to be about 5 weeks extended.
Actually, I have one more question. What's the hard deadline from the state, and do we know what the penalty is?
So we are working with DOT on that. Their hard deadline is September 30th for them to finish their contract, which would mean that they would want the cities done earlier than that so that they have time to pave the final lift and to do the pavement markings. In talking with DOT a little bit, they said we could work together on that and see what kind of options we would come up for. I would say that if we got to a cold weather paving situation, which would be when the temperature on their part of the contract would be below 40 degrees for the surface, they have an additive bid item of $2.50 per ton of asphalt. And for the additional rollers that have to be on site to compact it quicker, the additional additives to the asphalt. And that would probably have to be, the city would probably take that cost because the city's project is the one pushing it into the cold weather paving situation. I guess to give you a rough number, looking at about $15,000 to $20,000 for that $250 a ton.
The funding has to be completed by October 31st.
That transition, is that, what happens if you went back to the beginning of the 200 block and made it to the city center and made that transition all for the 2 blocks rather than 1 block?
Yeah.
1 block just seems to me to be foolhardy. I mean,
Mhm.
in New Street, and you go down the street like that,
Yep.
but if it could, is a possibility of doing that, of making the transition longer so it's not felt?
Yeah, and that would be nice, but unfortunately the 200 block, the buildings between the side of the road, they're only about a foot off. But down by the alibi, they're 2 feet off. And so if we did it at the other building, I don't think we'd have enough slope continuously to go all the way across. I'd be concerned about the amount of water that in a heavy rain the amount of time that it would take it to get all the way across the road on a flatter slope like that. Because if you, let's say you only have a slope of 1.5% across there, that water is now going that full length at 1.5% versus on the other side, we're looking at like a 3.5% slope. So it would be much steeper and the water would move more quickly across there. Yeah, I don't think that that's possible, just from where the building heights are on the difference on the 200 block from the 100 block.
Chad, I have a question about the delays. I know that we're significantly ahead right now. Where would this, if we chose option C and D, where would this put us in relationship to when we think we would be done? Is it going to be moving out to that September 30th date, or is it because we are ahead 2 or 3 weeks? What impact does that have?
Yeah, so the project in and of itself is actually, they've been running into some more and more delays in different pieces. Specifically right now, we're waiting on Xcel Energy to be able to hook up the lift station. And so that lift station is key to starting the next phase of this project. And so from that standpoint, they're looking at some delays on their own that are going to push them towards the end of the project deadline in the first place. With this additional work that they would come back and have to remobilize in for, if they could do it at the same time, I think we're still probably looking towards that late September mark overall. So I think there'd be, when we talk about 4 to 5 weeks, I think they were hoping to have this done before September 1st, and then have that kind of 10-day buffer. I think their contract was supposed to be by September 10th. But now with these delays, we're probably looking more towards the September 20-something area for completion of the city's portion.
So it's really a net 2-week delay, not a net week 5, right? Because we had already planned for it to be somewhere around the 10th of September. Now you're adding a week and a half to 2 weeks. So it's a net additional 2 weeks, not 5.
Yes, I believe so. But this part of the project, the downtown area will remain torn up, I guess, for longer, because it can't be put back together until they can get the storm sewer here and put that in and then go through the motions of putting everything back together. So you're right, Chad. I think the total aggregate of the project will probably be 2 to 3 weeks. But I think the impacts to the downtown area will be more closely associated with that 5 to 6 week mark of delays in that area. And yeah, if that makes sense.
Last week when we were talking about this, you were referring to adding storm sewer, and there would be, the waves in the road.
Yep.
Is that still an issue with option C?
Yes, that would still be there with option C.
Only in a couple of places though, where the storm sewers, where the storm sewers coming in,
Yep.
or drains are, pardon me.
And they'll be in there. And I mean, because we can do it with one set of storm inlets instead of 2,
Okay.
it wasn't maybe quite as bad as I was thinking that it was going to be with multiple humps in the road. But there still will be one. As you come out of Maple Street, you'll kind of go up, and then it'll go down to those storm inlets outside of American Family, and then it'll continue to go up to the Birch Street intersection from there. The grade changes in there are relatively minor, and so you probably have similar grade changes on your city streets right now, where you kind of go over and up as you see storm sewer rises and falls. And hopefully they won't be that bad. And they shouldn't be, just from the design, because what we have designed is, and you can see that on page R5 there, the second sheet of your pieces. So we're coming down from Birch Street somewhere around that 0.6% range, and then heading back up out of those inlets at approximately 0.3. And then the parts that you don't have in front of you show that it kind of comes back down at the Maple Street intersection, back to that slope that's currently there. So I think at this point, I'm less concerned now about the rideability on the 200 block than I am on the 100 block. With that transition and feeling that it's not that I don't think that it can be done, but I think you are going to feel your car roll as you go. And there's places that it happens in other areas and such. Is it ideal? No, but
I think we also have to take into consideration that they're driving 25 miles an hour, not 55, right? You'd definitely feel it. I think that if the faster you were going, you'd feel that tip more drastically, I would think.
absolutely, yep. And you cover that distance quicker, and so you'd feel that transition one way and back more quickly if you were going faster. But 25, you're right, Chad.
I guess I'm one of the concerns, or not a concern, but the visual of a semi coming down the street in the travel lane, and he gets to that dip, is it going to go, you know, how much is the semi going? You're going to see that semi going towards you if you're standing next to your car, or is it going to be small enough so it's not going to affect your?
I don't think you'll see that.
Okay.
I wouldn't be concerned about that. I mean, the road grades are still within travelable amounts. It's just that you're going from a travelable slope this way to a travelable slope this way. And it's over the course of probably about 130 feet is what we're shooting for in there. Typically you can change grade at about 1% every 25 to 30 feet. And so we're going from a 1.5% on the downhill to a 3.5 on the uphill. So we've got about 5 feet there. So we're looking at, 5%, not 5 feet, misspoke, a 5% grade change over 125 to 130 feet, kind of puts us right in that range. So I don't think semi drivers will be concerned with tipping, and I don't think pedestrians will be.
No, I'm just thinking the visual. You're standing next to your car, and here comes a semi, and it kind of goes.
Yep.
Well, especially when you got to walk down, half a block down the bicycle lane to get to the ramp. Seeing that 18-wheeler come your way. Quite honestly, looking at these three options, I don't like any of them, and this is why. And I'm sure the engineering on them is fine, and they're all doable and what have you. There's a couple things that just give me heartburn over it, and I'm going to put it out there. First off, this was your design. This was MSA's design.
Yes.
And our downtown is our crown jewel. Our downtown is what we want people to come and see and what we want to attract people here. And with those boulevards that are not sidewalks, even though they're made out of sidewalk material and look like sidewalk, etc. It looks bad. It'd be like me going into your house and you asking me to paint and hang some pictures. Well, you're going to have the old color bleeding through and everything's going to roll off the end of your picture frame because I don't hang anything straight.
Okay.
And then listening to your wife yell at you for the next 5 years for hiring me to do that.
Sure.
And the public has been very, very clear that they don't like the way that the design's going so far. They don't like the boulevards and the angles that they are at. And I get the feeling that these options are duct tape fixes to them, and yet we're getting dinged on the additional cost on it on your design. If I go to a restaurant and order a grilled cheese sandwich and it comes to me burnt, I send it back and they build me a new grilled cheese sandwich. I don't pay for the first one and then pay more for the second time around. And that's what's giving me heartburn over this whole thing. We don't like what the end product is becoming. We don't like the angles of the boulevards. We want to get that fixed. And I don't see a very good option to achieve that. It's a lot of, I'm not comfortable with any of the options. So I don't know where we go from here, but those are my concerns. One of the questions that came up, there was like 18,000 yards of material removed from downtown. Is that accurate?
there was material that was removed because of poor subgrade, and there was a
Okay.
lot of material that was also brought in.
Are those equal numbers?
I would have to check our quantities on it, but I think it's pretty close. If you look at the pages you have in front of you, you can see the existing center lines and the
Mhm.
proposed center lines on those grades. And so the dashed lines are the proposed center lines, and the solid blue line across there or the existing is dashed, the proposed is blue. And you can see in some areas we're lower, and in a couple areas we're higher.
Mhm.
And so, yes, I mean, the material, one of the things to remember that as they're taking out material, you're bringing in base material. And so, like, the material that you saw heading off site
Mhm.
is being replaced with gravel, because now you have a foot of gravel under your road that you, over time, deteriorated into poor material to build a road on.
Right.
And so some of that material that you've seen leaving the site was being replaced with gravel. Some of it was being replaced with sand because it was just soupy, organic topsoil that was buried underneath your road.
Right.
So overall, I mean, everyone is kind of up in arms that we've lowered the road so much. To be honest, looking through our plans, our center line really hasn't changed much more than 3 inches in either direction, no matter what. And
So why did we go from a downtown where the sidewalks met the curb? You know, like you have on your plan here where it says 1.5 down, 1.5 degree or 1.5% grade sidewalk to the curb with no boulevard even mentioned in the design.
Yep.
I get it that the city's not plumb.
Yeah.
It happens. And I get it that the water line table is about 5 feet below where you're working. So I'm sure there's some flex going on there at any given time, but I hope you can understand where my heartburn's coming from.
I absolutely understand. The reason that
We don't want people coming back in a year or people driving by because it's too hard to walk up that sidewalk.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, I know I was sarcastic and snarky about the walking down the bicycle lane with the 18-wheeler next to you, but that is a huge concern. I've had 18-wheelers skim by me. That's not at 25 miles an hour or 10 miles an hour. It is not a fun feeling at all. And I would hate to see my 75-year-old mother walking down that bike lane so that she could get to that ramp.
Yep.
That would be ridiculous, and I would be irate to no end about it. So,
Yeah, I understand. And I guess to address your question of why the downtown looks different now, if we didn't move the center line of the road, it's because your old sidewalks were sloped straight from your building down to your curb. And quite frankly, because your old curb didn't really drain all that well. And so you had, like, before the project started or while the project was going and we still had sidewalks in there, we threw a level on that digital level reads percents. We threw one on in front of Acme Junk Store, and you had 6+% right through there. I mean, if you want to see what that looks like, I took a walk up to Birch Street here and down, and there's, I believe it's New Life Church is on the side of Birch Street. And that sidewalk, not even at the like ramp spots, but in between those ramps, because they have multiple ramps that kick down to the sidewalk, a sidewalk is 6.5% across there. And so over 13 feet, if you can go 6.5%, where now we have to be 1.5%, you gain a lot of distance. You gain a lot of vertical distance. And so, unfortunately, having cross slopes on that like that is not legal due to the ADA laws. They have to be less than 2%. And so, we'd love to put your sidewalks back exactly how they were, except that's not going to be good for
I
most
don't want them
citizens
the way they
anymore.
were. I want them right.
So-
And this is not,
Is
it looks, I mean, we got a luge ramp going down through our downtown right now.
there a line item in the CDBG grant that we can, that says we can cross out ADA compliant sidewalks and slope it in and pay a penalty?
I guess I'll defer to you on that, Dave.
You have to meet the ADA requirements anytime you redo your street. And, yeah, they wouldn't penalize you, they would just reject the,
Not give you your money.
right.
Yeah.
You're not compliant with the ADA.
As I understand it, the CDBG fund is administered by Housing and Urban Development.
Yep.
And as a federal program, you have to meet federal laws. And so that would include ADA compliance.
One other topic that was, or solution that was brought up the other day when we were downtown was to not have the ADA portion of the sidewalk as wide as it currently is. What would happen if we were to not have, what is it now? 8 feet?
It varies between 11 and 12 feet, depending on
Okay.
which side.
So
Yeah.
how wide does that have to be? And what would be the option if we were to make that a shorter distance and then slope from there down to the curb?
Mhm.
Are we gonna get to our 8%?
You, in most areas, yes, absolutely. In some areas you will not, like, just for purely, I mean, arbitrary number, if you take it back 4 feet, right now we have a 4-foot boulevard. If you take it back another 4 feet and had an 8-foot boulevard, you would cut your slope in half because you're going the same height over twice the distance. And so if right now you have a 10% slope, you will now have a 5% slope.
Okay.
Or if you have so if right now you have a 16, it will go to an 8. There are some drawbacks that come with that. Specifically, narrowing your sidewalk up, you can narrow it up legally to still meet ADA standards. I believe you can go all the way to, I believe it's 4 feet as a walkway. I would be concerned about that myself. Just, there was a lot of residents last week that made references to them kind of walking and going downhill as they walk, and were concerned about stepping off. If you were to put that slope now closer to them, granted it's less steep, and so maybe there's not as much concern with them stepping off. But it would still be closer to where they're walking.
But it's still compliant. If it was at 8%.
So the terrace area is actually, because it's not a sidewalk, and
Right.
because there is an accessible route next to it, it doesn't have to be compliant.
But let's just say we want it to be compliant.
If you want it to be compliant and that is the goal, that would be an option that could potentially solve that issue, yes.
We looked at Crandon just before the meeting,
Mhm.
and that's what they did.
Mhm.
They did the narrow. And it's not ideal.
As narrow as what it, when you're talking 4 feet, because there's also that buffer between by the building as well. And that's, in some places 1.5 feet and in other places it's less than.
Yes.
Yes.
There are some areas that the building heights, they have a small little ramp into them as well, just because they had to. And so we would have to be extra cautious in those areas to make sure that we still had our 4 feet between where that ramp starts heading up, that there's still 4 feet of clear area. Yes, it is an option.
And with that, again, now we have an E.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would that fix both blocks?
That option could be utilized on both blocks. I don't think that it would fix everything down by, it would be roughly 8%. I believe right now it's right about 16% at the alibi. So if you back that up, it'd be roughly 8%.
But it would eliminate the need for additional storm sewer.
Yes, it would. Mhm.
What's the worst grade on the 100?
That was to say a 4-foot sidewalk instead of a 12-foot?
Yeah.
Yes.
4 foot of ADA compliant sidewalk.
Yes.
Right, with an 8% ramp.
Yes.
Up to an 8%.
Yeah, so there will be no benches or chairs, so there won't be no room on the flat spot.
Correct.
Is this ADA marked somehow? Is there gonna be like a, painting on the asphalt or on the concrete saying this is
It's up to
ADA
us. If
compliant or not, or?
you want marking, you put it on.
Who teaches what? So,
I think if you're choosing to go this route, I would hesitate to narrow your sidewalks down anything below 6 feet.
Yeah, and I was just throwing that out there because that was what was discussed when we were
And that,
there, and that is a possibility.
and I do want to caution too, that right now you have one, maybe 2 steps to get up that steep spot. You reduce the slope and now you have 8 feet, and now you have 4 steps across there. So I just want to be very clear that everyone's understanding that, that, there was a lot of discussion last week, even about the 8% spots that people were unhappy about. And if you longer,
Mhm.
I want to make sure that everyone is aware of that piece of it as well.
I'm not saying I'm a proponent of that.
No, it's
It was brought up
definitely-
to me.
It is an option, and it can be considered, absolutely.
So Tim, if your comment that you just made about what is considered ADA compliant and what is not, would the colored concrete definition between the boulevard and the sidewalk be something that you would consider to be the delineation between ADA compliant and not?
well, then at least it'd be marked and, there could be like an arrow saying this is ADA compliant and this is not.
Can you think of any place in the world that that's done?
Oh, no, not
I
at all.
But I actually saw some pictures of
And-
What's said,
sidewalk.
this is ADA
no,
over
what
here?
Yeah.
the different colors
Oh,
on
yeah,
the
yeah, I
boulevard
know.
versus the sidewalk.
Again,
So
I think you would be a crown jewel or, the first thing that everybody sees when they come into town. That would not be pleasant image.
I wouldn't want it red, that's for sure. That would be the last color I'd want it to be, because to me that says, emergency.
So going in, taking out all the boulevards, taking out all the curb, fresh slating it, starting over, raising everything up, that's not an option.
Why would you have to take the curb out? So we're
Just-
talking just
just
side,
bring that
side.
Bring that up so that you get the 1%, 1.5% grade off of the sidewalk.
No, now we're talking about just changing that grade over an 8-foot span, not not moving the curb and gutter.
I don't like that option either.
No, but if you change
I moved on
that,
to my option E, I think we're at right
We're
now.
now on F.
Okay, thank you. So that's not an option at all.
To,
Start over.
All it takes is money, Tim.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
well, that's essentially in some ways what we did this week, is we tried to start over. We looked at playing with the road grades. We went out there, we took elevations of where the sidewalk is at, because that is at ADA compliant slope. We put those into our drawings, and we have played with the road grades, we have played with the curb grades, like, essentially, that's what we did. I mean, I understand that you want to just see it done.
Well, I want to see it done right.
It's
Yeah.
impossible to do. So, I mean, and this is kind of what we got at the meeting the other night, is that there's all these competing factors that are going into it,
Mhm.
and somewhere something has to give, because it can't all be true at once. And so we can, I mean, I just don't see it a good option. If there was a good option, we'd have found it. We'd done it. And we've toyed with this and played with it, and it's just not there to rip it all out and start over and have exactly what you had before.
If we did C and D options, and then added in the E option, does that get us to a much better slope status in the 100 and 200 blocks? What does that do? Even, if we shrunk the ADA compliant sidewalk to a 6 foot with a slope then 6 foot out to the curb, given the other changes that we're making, are we getting more into that 5 to 3% slope, or what does that do for us?
Yes, I believe you would be. However, I don't actually think that we would need to do option E if we pursued option C and D. I think at that point, you're just spending money to make it even less, because if we do option C, all of your slopes are gonna be 8% or less, except for that one area by the new inlets already. The majority of it will be between that 3 to 6% range. And so certainly if you back that up another, let's say you back it up another 4 feet, now you're down in that 1.5 to 3% range. So that it's an option, but I think at that point you're spending money to gain, take a 1/2 inch off that slope.
We were going to choose to do C and D, have both blocks where they need to be compliant. How do we pay for it?
Well,
I'm with Tim. I don't believe that we should be paying for it. We hired a consulting firm, engineering firm to build us a new downtown, and now we're having to rework it. So quite frankly, I don't believe that we have to even pay for it. But that's, again, one of my opinions. But
the information I presented last week and all during this process, is contingent on, or is factored on projections of growth in your TIF districts, okay? What I presented last week was a concept where we could also pay for the industrial park.
Mhm.
Okay. If we weren't going to do that, there's plenty of ways of funding this. There's showed no growth in the value of your TIP districts, number 6, or number 9, which overlays number 6. So that value of number 6 should stay the same, and you'd be producing increment. But as 9, and since 2019, when we created that, it's about $1.5 million. That does not include Bremer Bank or any other development. So I'm comfortable with that. This whatever is in addition to this project can be paid for through the TIF districts as well.
And the total cost that you have come up with for this project is what tonight? 60?
Additional,
Yeah.
it would be, if options C and D were together, it would be
$67,000.
67,000. Rough number.
That's actually pretty minor compared to the whole project.
And I guess I do want to comment just quickly on your grilled cheese comment, Tim, if I can. I think when we entered into this, we brought the plans to the council. We sat down with the council, and the council has been involved in all these decisions. And you have a road that works. You have a downtown that works. You ordered a grilled cheese and now you're asking for a quesadilla. is what's happening here. You got what you ordered for, and now you're asking for something else. And I know it's tough to use that, but MSA did sit down, go through these plans with the council. They were approved for construction by the council every step of the way.
So why were these boulevards never brought up and emphasized? Because that's been a concern in other projects, has it not?
I guess never to this degree. I've never had to have.
But it's been a
these-
concern in other projects.
It really hasn't, no. I guess maybe the Crandon one, but that came out of our Rhinelander office, and I really wasn't involved with that project. The other projects that we've done this on, it hasn't been an issue. And I agree that your slopes are steeper than in some of these other areas, like Luck. We did it in Luck, and it does slope, but it's not as steep. It tied in nicer with the curb. Just did. And I guess stepping into this on the construction side of things, I was not involved in the going through the plans in the first part, but I know how MSA operates, and I guess I can't say for sure that the boulevards were emphasized throughout the process, and it doesn't sound from your perspective like they were, and I apologize for that. However, they were in the plans the entire time, and so.
And living in Luck, I've never noticed it. We haven't had any complaints, and it's been 4 years now, I think. Granted, we don't have the
But
slope.
we've been getting complaints and the project's not been done yet.
And, we did it in Augusta as well. I think from my perspective in Luck, I like the idea of the colored concrete, trying to delineate things, but that's,
Yeah, they had that in Marshfield too, or Manitowoc. I was there last week, and
it gives
apparently,
you that visual difference so that people can recognize that maybe there's something different about here.
yeah, it was light green.
Looks like grass.
We went dark gray, so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad that back in whenever they built the downtown and developed all this, that they didn't have the engineering skills and know-how and equipment to build it with the right amount of foresight and thought into this for water drainage, because I can imagine when the last time they did this project, before they put the concrete down, was it back in 2029? I heard the engineering skills, and they didn't have computers, and they made it work back then, and but they didn't have any rules or regulations to go with. The ideal thing now would be to raise or lower buildings in the low spots and raise buildings in the high spots, and just make it so it all flows and everything flows in the right direction, and we can't do that.
But they made it flow in 29.
Sort of.
Sort of, yes.
The town's still here. It didn't float away. So I've made my opinion. I've made my thoughts known. I will leave it to the council to proceed with a vote if that's what they wish to do.
I understand what you are saying, Tim. I do. And I also feel as though the onus is somewhat on us, that we maybe didn't look at the plans probably as completely as maybe what we should
We
have.
entrusted MSA to give us a good downtown.
You are correct. And I am equally as concerned with the water flowing and not being blocked up at Maple Street and in front of my building and down at Memorial Drive as I am with the sidewalks. And I guess there has to be some concessions in order to make that work. And I guess that's where we are now.
Yeah, I don't, from my perspective, I've lived in town for just about 60 years, and who knew that there was 2 feet of difference between the alibi and the other side of the street? I mean, I knew there was a little bit, but 24 inches, really? I mean, that just kind of blows me away. I knew your building was higher than Jed Johnson's, but I guess that was a new issue. But I do appreciate the fact that those 12-foot sidewalks or 14-foot sidewalks had the same amount of slope. You can't build them like that anymore. Don't make any difference whether you like them or not. You can't build them if you're going to get a government buck for doing it. If you want to put the bill all yourself, then you can build them however you want, I suppose. But I don't know. I guess I think the 2 options that you've given us are probably the best that we can do, short of knocking a block down and releveling all the buildings and starting over again. If anybody's got any other ideas as to what, granted, we'd all like to see them with no slope, but at this point in time, I don't, if you got any workable ideas, I think now's the time to spit them out. Otherwise, we gotta.
You're not allowing comments.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of that. This is not
Yeah.
a public comment.
No, but
We've
we've
heard
had
enough.
comment, and I haven't heard anybody with.
I will say that I've had much conversation with many business owners in town, and the silent majority is what I've been hearing from now. And it does not agree with all the negativity that's been blasted all over social media. And so just know that there's enough positive about what's actually happened or what is going on right now, and just want it done. So it's definitely the silent majority.
Yep.
So that be said. You've been very quiet.
We're stuck with making the best worst choice, I think. Because we're not going to re-engineer everything and do it over, because that doesn't make sense. And we can't do it.
I don't know that there is a do-over.
No, there isn't. A do-over is you get in a time
Right.
machine and you go back 3 years and look
Or
at the
or
plans
80
differently.
years or something like that.
Yeah, that's all of those which are not reasonable. But it seems like the least difficult thing to do is C&D. I agree that it's certainly not the choice you'd make if you were doing it at the beginning, but it's those transitions that are going to be, I'll be interested to see what actually comes of that for how that meets. But I don't see a different choice.
And 11 to 12-foot ADA compliant sidewalks, I think, would be greatly appreciated in 50, 60
I think the
years.
sidewalks,
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
go back to what Tim was saying, beautiful wide sidewalks are a hallmark. If you have that in your city, people are happy. Maybe not if you have to clear the snow, but still, it's nice to have those big wide sidewalks. So if there's a way to get with engineering and the work that's been done to be able to raise it to be not perfect, but certainly a lot better than it is, and to the point where it's probably acceptable to most everybody, I don't see a different answer.
I would agree with you, Eric. I think that it would be also something we should consider of having a different colored section that is not the sidewalk, just to help delineate that. So I guess that would be option B, C, and D, right?
Yes.
So on that, with the option B, Drew, have they poured any more red concrete than what's down at Highland?
No.
So I've heard some pushback of the red, that it's not your first choice. And so,
I like the red where it's
Where
supposed
it
to be
is.
red.
okay,
I love
Right.
that because that definitely draws
the bump
attention
outs.
to the
Okay.
bump outs because that's critical. That's why they're there. That's why we have bump outs.
for sure.
That's critical there. I
Yep.
don't necessarily like that idea in the boulevard. That's my opinion.
I'll
There's
agree.
other people sitting at this table.
I was gonna be that if you didn't want red, now's the time, before
Oh,
they
no,
pour anymore.
I
But if you like the red at the
bump.
bump outs, we can keep that and you can discuss colors on the boulevard. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Will that look strange or not? To have red button up to gray or some other color?
Mhm.
No?
None of you said you meant to do that.
Just like the picture?
I
Sort of.
do like the idea of just being a different color of the same shade, you know, dark gray is probably a good thing.
Well, it'll help the
Melting.
sun
Melt the snow.
melt off if it's darker, yeah.
Help it melt the snow where
We want it melted?
we want it melted.
Yeah. That's where the sidewalks come in.
All right, I'll make a motion that we accept option B, option C, and option D. Decided on the
I'll second.
boulevards.
Was that a second, Chad? Okay. Any
Yes.
further discussion?
No.
Okay, should we have a roll call vote?
Sturbush,
No, I don't think we should be paying for it.
Van Werkum,
Yes,
Land,
Yes,
Leonard.
Yes.
Elkin.
Yes.
Okay.
When
Motion.
would the council like to decide on colored concrete on those? I mean, if we're doing storm sewer, we've got a couple weeks here. But the sooner that we know, the better, so that the concrete contractor can get their ducks in a row. Would the city like to see some sort, is the general feeling kind of a dark gray charcoal type feel?
That would be fine.
concrete right now is really, really bright.
Yep.
It's blinding.
So I believe Luck had like charcoal gray
Yeah.
in theirs, and that's what we put in Augusta too. It does, it looks really nice. So when would the council like to make that decision? I can get some information from the concrete contractor if you'd like.
Vision tonight.
Sure.
I would be ready, I guess, with charcoal gray, seeing pictures of Luck and seeing it elsewhere.
I agree.
So is that a motion?
Yes, I'll make.
Sure.
Charcoal gray.
Well, but it's part of B.
It is part of B.
So Rick, you want to amend your motion?
pardon?
Would you like to amend your motion
To include the color?
to include the color?
Instead of having, what you said was colored concrete to be decided at a different
Great.
time.
Just
amend
to
it
be
to be-
decided, now it's been
You
decided,
could
so,
amend it to
as
be
far as
at
I'm
a charcoal
concerned,
gray color.
yeah. I could amend the motion for that.
And I'll second the amended motion.
Okay. Any further discussion
On the amendment.
on the amended order? Okay. Roll call again?
Sturbush,
Still no.
Van Werkum,
Yes.
Land,
Yes.
Leonard,
Yes.
Elkin.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.